Do you know, years ago, when I moved to California, I met your grandfather. Many people don't know that I met him in high school. And it was my first year in California. I was a senior. And he comes rumbling into the high school on his motorcycle, making all kinds of noise. And Mrs. Myers just chewed the hell out of him. "You're late again." He was always late for typing class. And I tried not to have him sit next to me in class. There was another girl there had her eye on him. And I thought, oh, I don't want him next to me. So I put a bunch of books on the seat next to me. But he came in, corduroys. I remember those gold corduroys. They were so strange. I wasn't used to that. Kind of rough and ready, you know. And so he came in and he looked around and he took the books off of the chair and sat down there. And that's where he stayed the rest of the semester. He could type better than I did. I don't know where he learned, but he did.
Where was this?
In Sonoma, in high school. What year was that? 1942, I guess. Yeah, I must have been. The war had just started and all. And we'd moved to California to find a job. My parents had. At the time, we were living with my cousin Jim. He had a house out in that area, a ranch. And he talked my father into coming out and staying with him because he lived in San Francisco and he needed somebody to take care of his ranch. And so we lived there in his house for over a year or so before we moved to Napa. And Daddy got a job at Basalt Rock. And so then we went and bought our house, a little house on Brown Street. Not on Brown Street, I'm sorry, on Pacific Street. What was it, 2590 Pacific Street. And I went to work at Mare Island. First they stuck me on one of those, what do they call those flat things, ships? And I had to go down in the hole and work on these light switches. And I says, this is not for me. And I said, I got to have something different. I had a cousin who worked down there too. And so I got a job in the office in drafting. Didn't know a thing about it, but anyway, I was ad-libbing. I had met a couple of girls up there that are ladies, and Margie's husband was the bus driver. When we went to school, he used to drive the bus, and I'd catch that, and that's where I had met him. But after I graduated, then I met her at Mare Island, and she tried to teach me some drafting, but I wasn't too really interested in that. You know, when you're 18, barely 18. In fact, I don't think I was. I just graduated from high school, so I was just barely 18. This kind of tracks your memory. Taxes it rather, because it's been a long time.
Tell me about you guys dating.
About dating. Now that is another story. He would come rumbling in to the house on this motorcycle. First, one time he brought me ice cream. And my father wasn't too thrilled. He didn't want me to be going with some rogue like that. So actually we didn't date a lot, or go out a lot, because I went on his motorcycle a couple of times. And that was frowned on highly. And then I got sick with something, and he brought me some more ice cream. He was always buying me ice cream. He doesn't buy it for me anymore. But then he got kind of waylaid in in high school, his friend came out from Chicago, and he took off and went back to Chicago with him. And he was draft age. And he had no sooner got to Chicago than he got his draft papers. And so after that, he was drafted and went to, let's see, he went to Texas. I think he went to Alabama the first time for training. And we would correspond. He bought me a watch, trying to get in good with. And he had Mama buffaloed. I mean, he really did. She thought he was kind of sweet, because I dated another boy, and she didn't like him. But she kind of liked Roger. She thought he was pretty neat, and so, but Daddy didn't like that motorcycle thing. And so, he was gone for a long time. I dated other boys along the way, and we corresponded. I never told him I was dating anybody else, and I never told the boys that I was stuck on somebody else either. I figured they didn't need to know. And so anyway, life kind of went on that way. I'd go to work every day, and then finally my father got sick, and they put him in the hospital. And he didn't come out. And I should have thought of that. Anyway, my father passed away, and I guess I kind of fell apart. I don't know. You don't have to put that in there. But then he came home, and he had been in Seymour, Indiana, I believe. It was Seymour. This was after his training and all. You'll have to figure that out. And he asked me if I'd go back east with him. And I says, no, not unless we're married, or something like that to him. And he says, well, will you marry me? I says, yes. And so it took about 3 days for us to throw a cheap wedding together, because he had to be back east, or Middle East, I don't know exactly where. It was Seymour, Indiana. And so I got it organized, and my mother-in-law decided I should be married at the mission in Sonoma. And so his father was against it. He didn't want him to get married, because then he would lose his hired hand, or his cheap hand, whatever. And so we got married one day. Oh, you know, he went hunting the morning before we got married with his buddy. I could have killed him. But here we were trying to get this little wedding together. Didn't remember my ring or anything. Oh, this was something else. And so he dashes down to the jewelry store and buys me this little band and a small gardenia corsage. And we continued the wedding in the afternoon, early afternoon. Well, when it was over with, my mother and sisters were there, and my in-laws, and some of Roger's family was there, his mother and father, and Harvey, and Vaughn, and Marcia. And then my brother, Will, took us to Crockett to catch a train. And that was one of the longest rides I've ever gone on. And I've been on a train before. We went to Seymour, Indiana. And then he got a room there. And then he went back to his job. And I was stuck there in that room until he came home.
What was his job?
He was a pilot. He flew, I don't remember what kind of aircraft he flew, but he flew some kind of aircraft. What was it? Some 6 something or other. I don't know what it was. I didn't pay that much attention to it. We used to have good times. We went to horse racing, which I enjoyed thoroughly. One time in my life. And we had parties that we'd go to. I met a lot of good friends there. I can still remember some of them. That's when you were still wearing gloves and hats. You didn't go to a cocktail party without your hat on and a pair of gloves. It just was unheard of. And
you were living with his parents?
No, not then. I was still in Seymour, Indiana then, until we didn't live with his parents till he went overseas. We were in Seymour, and then he was sent to Warrensburg, Missouri, where Connie was born. That's when I was pregnant in Seymour. I knew that right away. There was no doubt. My body always tells me these things when I'm in trouble. And so then we went to Warrensburg, and we got a little flat, or a 1-bedroom, with a walk down to the hall bathroom. And I did a lot of cooking in a coffee pot. That's all I had to cook in a little plate. Because the coffee pot was electric, fortunately, or I'd have been in trouble. And then from there, there was things that happened in between, but they don't come to mind right now. He got sent back to Salinas to go overseas. This was after Connie was born. Oh, it snowed there in Warrensburg, just terrible. And I'd go for my morning walks by myself because he had to go to work, and I was big as a house. But you had to walk, snow or no snow. And then Connie came along, and he got orders to go overseas. So we packed my sister came to see me when Connie was born, and she had a 6-month-old baby. And she and I and the 2 babies and your grandfather. What kind of car did he say that was? It was a little Plymouth, wasn't it? Convertible. And we put the kids on the back shelf of the car, and the 3 of us sat in front. And he drove straight through. He wouldn't stand. He would not stop for anything, because he had to be in Salinas at a certain time. So he drops me off at my mother and father-in-law's place. And there my life stood. A baby, living with strangers. I don't think so. And I had never really, until I got married, been away from home. You know, I visited my cousin and that stuff, but they were right there in town, so there was no problem. But I made the mistake, I guess. I wanted to go to Salinas to see him off because I knew it would be the last time. And so Grandma, he went to China. Let's see, was it, what was the name of the air base that he went to? Well, you'll have to ask him. I can't remember. But the thing was, I asked my mother-in-law if she could watch Connie, because Connie was little and I didn't want to take her with me. I didn't even know where I was going. He just told me to meet him in Salinas. And so I took the bus down there, got off the bus, and I asked the taxi driver, I says, how far is it to the first hotel? He didn't even tell me what hotel to go to. Me, I'm as green as a turnip or whatever, or cucumber. And so I looked up, and he said that I could walk to that hotel. And so I hiked over to the hotel, and who would be sitting in it but Mr. Thibeau? Thank God, because I was one scared kid. I mean, I had never been on my own. And so I stayed there until it was time for him to ship out. And I caught a bus back to Sonoma. And of course, things weren't going too well there, because Grandma didn't have time enough to take care of the stuff on the ranch. And take care of the baby too, which she adored the baby. She said that child could just do anything. She's worse than I am with these kids. But then he was gone. I don't know exactly. I guess stopped counting the days because they were so long. And he was going to send for us. He'd rented a house in Shanghai. And he had a houseboy. He told me in the letter how nice it was to have this houseboy, and the house was nice and everything. And he wanted me to come over there with Connie. Well, by that time, just about the time we were planning on going, Grandma had said that she would go with me. She had never gotten out of the house. Mr. Thibeau would have never let her out. So we were having a little controversy about that. And then they had a great big air accident over there. And we didn't know whether he'd been killed or who it was that was in it, but it was from his flight. And so we sent him a wire and told him to come home. He'd been over there long enough. And I think by that time he had gotten out of the Air Force and started flying for the Chinese airline. Somewhere in there, he got out of the Air Force, joined this Chinese airline, and was flying for them. And it was they just flew by the seat of their pants. The planes just didn't.
How long was it there?
Oh, I really can't say. It was a couple of years. It was a year and a half to 2 years. Because when he came back, Connie was walking. It might have been longer than that. See, there's some of these things that slip in my mind. And so he came home, and I says, this is it. We need a home. And so he and his father went out and looked for a house. And we looked up a Silverado Trail, which was a house I wanted. But his father thought the one on Brown Street was much more stable. And it was a nice house. I loved it. It was plenty big for us and everything. And we could afford it. And then he got out of the service. And things went from one way to another. Paychecks were kind of few and far between. So I went to work. And I worked several years until Connie started to kindergarten. And then I devoted my time to being down at the school and helping the teachers. And let's see, Mrs. Howe was her name. She wanted me to get a teaching degree. She says she thought it would have been a smart move. Well, unfortunately, I turned it down. And I decided I wanted children, to raise my family and have children. And so I didn't proceed in that area. I should have, but I didn't. So that's the past. You just don't know what you pass up some days. But things have been really pretty good.
Now you were living on Brown Street.
Yeah. No furniture.
How long did you stay?
Let's see. Connie was about 3, 4 years. Let's see. She'd just gone into kindergarten. Okay, and when we left there, she was 13.
You had some children.
Huh?
You had some other children by then.
Yes, I had Joanne, no, she's always my child. I had Laurie first, and then I had Monica. And then we were shipped overseas.
So they were both born where?
Monica and Laurie were born in at Travis Air Force Base in California. Connie was born at Warrensburg, Missouri. And she went by there when she made one of her trips out there and took pictures standing in front of the hospital where she was born. And which she was really delighted that it was still around, but I don't know why. But the other two girls were born at Travis, because that's where we were stationed out of. Anyway, then the girls hadn't started to school yet when we went overseas. But Laureen was I really kind of pushed her into going to first grade, as kindergarten. She was too young, but I thought, well, if I don't put her in now, she'll be a year older, and she should have been in because of where her birthday is. Her birthday's in December the 22nd, and she would have been, which I know now, she would have been 7 years old, which would have been fine for first grade. And believe me, she didn't like going to school. She thinks Carly's bad. This child, she was my Carly. Yeah, we went over to Okinawa, and we lived out in the boonies, as we called it. Roger, your grandfather bought a house out there. You can't buy the land, you can just buy the house. And then when your term or contract runs out, it goes back to the landowner. And so we bought a house out there, and then eventually, fortunately first for me, a very good friend of mine moved in just down the street from us. At the time I didn't know she was going to be my dear friend, but she was. We kind of hung together and everything. She had 3 or 4 kids, and then I had my 2, and they were pretty close to the same age. And so we stayed out in the boonies, I don't know, longer than I really wanted. He went to Japan one season out there and left me there out in the boonies, and we had, what are they, hurricanes? And there was a big ditch where they raised potatoes out and behind us, like out in your place, and it filled with water. And the roof came off of the house. And I had the girls all in one corner of the house up high where they wouldn't get wet because the water was all over everything. And just me there. Of course, my neighbor was down the street. She was having the same kind of problem. And the rats came out of that sweet potato patch like you cannot believe. I woke up one night and you hear this noise and things running around and rats. Well, I hadn't told you that story before. See, some of it comes back to me. Anyway, and he was in Japan. The sun was shining. He didn't even think a thing about me being there with all that water. I was scared to death. But eventually, we moved on the base, Sterling Heights, and had a real lovely home there. They furnished it and everything. Had a maid. Of course, I had a maid off when I was in the boonies also, and then she came on the base with me when I moved. We just brought them along. And they were with us the entire time, 4 years that we were there. Connie went to high school. Laureen went to first grade. I don't think Monica went to school yet. I can't remember. But I know Laurie didn't care for school, grade school at all. It was just different. The teachers really didn't help. They were kind of cast-offs from the United States, looking for a job, you know. And so, anyway, we were there 4 years. We stayed an extra year because usually the tour is only 3 years. But I didn't want to uproot Connie from her graduation and all of her friends and everything there. So we stayed an extra year, and Your grandfather kind of lost out by us staying there of getting into flying the president's plane. He had to be down a notch and just fly the vice president's plane.
He was vice president around?
Yeah. See, there's some things I've heard. So we were sent back from Okinawa. We were sent back to Washington, D.C., and we bought a house in Maryland. And it was a nice house, big house. Your grandfather, that had a full basement underneath, and instead of finishing it, we bought the house. Instead of refinishing it, he decided he'd work on cars down in it. And he would drive around to the outside and down into the, take the glass doors off and drive his cars into the, well, anyway, cars is his life, I guess. But your mother went to school there, and so did Monica, and your mother was a guard to get the kids, what do they call them, to go walk across the street. And she was so proud when she put that little strap across her shoulder and leave the house in the morning. And Monica wasn't into too much then. As she got older, she got more active, but
She was how old?
Laurie must have been about 9. And, of course, there's 2 years difference in their age. And so she was, I don't think she had more friends than Monica did. I had a very dear neighbor who wanted to take Monica back to, where was it? Not Switzerland, I want to say. She was Swedish with her, and I put the kibosh on that because I wasn't sending my kid anywhere. And so I don't remember exactly how long we lived out in Maryland, probably a school term, and then your grandfather got orders that he had to move on base because his job was more demanding and he had to be at a certain spot at a certain time, so they gave us quarters there, and they were very nice and all. I couldn't handle them today because they had an upstairs in them. Unlike yours, I couldn't walk upstairs that many times a day. And so we lived there about 4 years at Andrews, where your grandfather did a lot of flying. And we had a pretty nice life. What did I do? I belonged to the Officers Club, Wives Club, and I did what I was told to do. You have certain things that you have to follow. And then I had this one gal, she was a French gal. Of course, I can't get along with French people too well, even though I have one for a husband. She was afraid that Roger was going to take her husband's job. Roger was next in line. And so the rumors just flew. And I says, really, I don't care. You can have it. I says, if they give him the job, that's fine. I'll do what I have to do. But boy, she was a bitter old bitch. She wanted that power. I never cared one way or the other. But I had a lot of good friends there, and we did a lot of partying. We did a lot of partying in my life. I think the women got together, and we worked in the Wives Club, and we participated in a lot of things. And a lot of things were mandatory. You just, if the commander said it was so-and-so, that's the way it was. And we did it. So once I moved here, I says,
what was going on during that time?
What was that?
In the 1960s.
Gee, yes. Yeah, because we moved here to San Antonio in 69, when your mother was in, is it Longfellow over here? In Longfellow, I guess. And Monica was in Baskin. Yeah, it was 69, and mostly he did a lot of flying. We had all these meetings that we had to go to. I didn't work or anything. I just took care of the kids. And there was a lot of talk about having a mixed school, and a lot of people were against it. It was that time, you know, that uprising, I guess. It was not, what was that one, the flower time? It wasn't that time. It hadn't got here yet, where everybody wanted to wear flowers and do as they pleased. Hippies, yeah. Was it Woodstock? And because that came in the 70s. That was after, but we had a touch of it there. But basically, it was just family life. I went to Puerto Rico once. Roger, your grandfather came in and says, "There's a plane going, do you want to go?" I said, "Sure, why not?" That's where I bought my mink stole. Didn't have to pay a lot of taxes on it. Of course, it just hangs in the closet. Huh? Did I work? New York. Oh, yes, yes. Well, let's see. What took us to New York? I don't know. I can't remember. We just had the two girls, and your grandfather and I went to New York. And to me, you have to ask him more about it than me. I just really... It was cold. We went on the ferry, and we saw the Statue of Liberty. We didn't go in it. We missed a lot. And to this day, I don't know why we were even there. So New York was... I've been to New York since. I went to New York with Connie later. Had a lot more fun. But that trip, I even forgot that I had gone on it. I'll have to remind your mother that she did go to New York. And then we were home back at Andrews. I still don't know why we did that. Have to think about it. And then he got orders to go to Vietnam. And he refused to go. He was going to get out of the service if he had to go to Vietnam. And so they gave him this assignment down here in San Antonio at Kelly Air Force Base. And so we had to leave all our friends. And we came to San Antonio. Oh my God, what a time. And we looked at houses and we looked at houses. And finally I says, "Well, you know, we don't find one pretty soon. I'm going to California. I'm tired of this." I had a sister that I could live with then. I didn't know, but anyway, I don't know what I'd done. We looked in California for houses. We looked here. And so finally he found this one, and I have the girls tell you what happened. We walked in, and as the little girls that were here visiting with me, they found a roly-poly bug. I don't know where they come from or anything, but when I walked into this house, this living room floor was covered with them. And I went to bed. I says, "You get somebody else to clean this up. I'm not cleaning." We stayed in the motel several weeks on Fredericksburg Road, across from the mall. And it was interesting, being new in this town and all. And the guys would fly in from Washington and stop by and visit us, which helped a great deal. It broke the monotony and while he was working and everything. And so anyway, finally they got the house cleaned up. I don't think your mother will ever forget. She says, "Mother just went to bed." I've never seen such a dirty house. And so we got the house cleaned up, and we kind of been here in San Antonio ever since. Raised the girls. They met their husbands. They had my grandchildren. Oh, Jefferson. They graduated from Jefferson High School, which is, what would we call it? You know what they call it. It's sort of a... I'll think of it in a minute. Laureen went to Longfellow over here on Sunshine, and Joanne went to Baskin over there on Babcock. They were, Monica was, what, in 4th grade, I guess, by that time, 4th or 5th grade. And Laureen was in Longfellow Junior High. And then when they graduated from there, of course, Monica finished up over at Longfellow, and then they went to Jefferson and graduated from Jefferson High. And then Monica decided to go to Chicago to go to the university when she graduated. And she went to Northwestern, which was another one of my big mistakes, but I was out-talked. Usually people don't out-talk me when I know something's wrong. But anyway, she went to Northwestern. And Laureen, your mother, met your father. And I liked him immediately. Oh, well, they probably carried on a lot more than I knew about. But some of her boyfriends weren't the savory kind, you know. There wasn't too many really eligible young men that I approved of. I was kind of critical, like my mother. And nothing was really good enough for her. And so finally she went to a party with someone one night, and she met your dad, Jack, and I took one look at him and I says, that's the boy for me. And from then on, I was glad to feed him. And Monica had a slew of kids. We were always partying out here. She would have all these little gangbusters out, and we'd have lights in the backyard and the music. One guy was a musician, and he had his band, and it was all kinds of noise. But I'd rather have him here than any place else. So this was always my idea in life. Even as Connie was growing up, I had a house full of kids, because I would rather know where they were, and which I think is very important. They came to the house after school, they stayed, they played, and then they'd go home and come back the next day. And she always had a slew of kids. So I made it so that they would be comfortable living at home. I didn't especially care for them to leave. I enjoyed my kids. I don't say they didn't get out of line. They did. Some days I felt like Monica would come in through the door and drop her stuff, and I'd whirl around and she'd be out again, gone. Nothing picked up. What else is, nothing's changed. It's the same old story. She says, Mom, I thought I would learn. I says, I didn't even give it a thought. Your mother was a lot easier. Monica was always a handful. But your mother was a lot easier on me and took care of things better. She had her problems, too. She had this old station wagon she had to drive to the college, and every morning I thought she was going to knock her head off. And, the battery was always dead, and she'd go out there and she'd be rushing around, and she'd have to get that car started. Poor child. But it was just one of those things she had to put up with, but she learned a lot. She learned how to take care of herself. And I think the old car is still out at one of your grandfather's places, sitting out there. But anyway...
What do you remember about Mom's wedding? She got married?
Oh, Well, first Connie got married, and she got married within a week. And I want to tell you, she called me, I think, just before the Labor Day. And you know what it is when there's a holiday. And she wanted to get married. Well, I was in Houston before she hung up the phone. And I looked over this guy. There was a couple of them, and I picked out what I thought was the better. And he's good to her. And so in a week we arranged a white wedding. Went to Joski's, bought her dress, ordered the food. They got married in the church, and they had an annex, and they weren't going to let me have champagne in there, but they relented. And we had the reception in the area there where they, what's it called? Auditorium or whatever. And we had our champagne, we had our cake, and lots of people. But that was one fast trip, getting that wedding together. We didn't take 3 weeks or anything. We had a week. And they wanted to get married, so we... Huh? No, they got married in Houston. We took off and went to Houston. I went to Joski's with her, got her dress, her shoes, ordered her flowers, called people. And of course, John helped. He had a lot of friends, and it was in the church, and it was good. So she got married and stayed there in Houston, lived at John had a home and all there already. So then I came home and collapsed, probably. And then a few years later, she has this baby, and I go to Canada to be there with her. And I take Laureen with me, and she goes skiing. She was a skiing freak. She just loved to ski, and Canada was a good place for it. And then we came home, and she's still going to the SAC, San Antonio College. And she was partying. I don't know who she was partying with that night. But she went to these people's houses, and she met Jack there. Your dad there. He'd come down from Austin. It was just destiny, really. And after they met, well, we knew it was going to be wedding bells, so we had more time to get it together. We had it at Randolph Air Force Base. I lined up the minister and set up the reception hall, and they catered the whole thing for us. And we had a lot of people there. And she had a lovely white gown. And it was very nice. Your grandfather and grandmother from Weatherford was there. We had our dinner the night before, and there was a lot of people. I really didn't know I was going to have all these wonderful grandchildren. Well, Monica, she was never going to get married. She and her girlfriend, they had decided that marriage wasn't, they were going to be business people. And she went to Chicago, as I said, and went to Northwestern, and got a lot of things in her head that she shouldn't have. But, and she worked for the television station for a while. She worked in television. She was on the weather here in San Antonio, did weather for a while. And then she went back to Chicago because she had a boyfriend there. And all of a sudden his name escapes me, and I knew him well. And before that, we had her graduation from the university there. And I took Alexander with me. He was just a little squirt. And we went back there for her graduation. Had a nice big graduation, and they had their party. And she stayed there to work. And then after a while, I don't know what brought it around. She went to Santa Fe and worked on the television station there. And I don't know whether it was before she went to Santa Fe or after that she came to San Antonio and worked on the television station here as a weather person. Well, as she says, it was pretty hectic. And so then she decided that she'd get her teaching degree. And she still hadn't found anybody to marry, you know, that she wanted to marry. And she was out having a gay time. Lots of parties and things, which she probably could have lived without. But anyway, she was in Santa Fe, and this guy comes along into the this office where Connie was, and they meet. And from then on, it was Steve. And that's where I got my other son-in-law. And the next thing I know, she calls me and says, "I'm getting married, Mother." And I says, "Oh, my Lord, when?" "Well, right away." She says, "But I'm going to take care of everything. I'm going to do it all." And she did. I paid the bill, but she did it all. Or we paid the bill, I should say. And so we went to Santa Fe, and she had got married, and your mother and your dad were there. And I think your dad was there. Your dad may not have been there. I don't know. I can't remember. But anyway, your mother and Connie were in the wedding party and all. And then they took off and went to Albuquerque for some reason, and we turned around and came home. So up until that point, by that time I was kind of worn out. What year? Let's see. I don't know. No. No, you weren't there yet. Let me see, what year? I'd have to look it up to know what year she was married. No, you weren't there, darling.
Talk about, I guess, your grandchildren's birth.
My grandchildren. Now, that is a story and a half. Your mother and father were stationed in Utah. I made more trips to Utah that year, and I worked at the doctor's office at that time. Let's see, what year were you born? Do you remember? 79. Yeah. I had worked for the doctor for a couple of years, but he was a good old goat, and he'd give me off time to go see her. And so if she had a little problem or anything, Grandma was there. And I was there the night that she decided it was time to go to the hospital. But they didn't want to go as soon as I wanted them to. Your father was out flying or at the job doing something. And so he came home. He was tired. And I says, "I think we need to go." "No, it's not time yet." And so here they're messing around. And finally they decided it was time. Well, they just got to the hospital in time is all I got to say about it. And by the time I got to the hospital, she was walking out of the delivery room because you were there. He says, "I'm not waiting for this anymore. I'm ready to move on," just like you are now. There's lots of things to be done. And then we're back here. They came back to San Antonio, and your dad started a school. And your mother decided she was going to go to nursing training. And so I kept you. Your dad would bring you by, or your mother, in the mornings. And then when he got off, he'd come by and pick you up. And you'd go to sleep in that little old pickup of his. But most of the day, we were playing. We'd play house. We'd take the sheet and cover up the bar and make us a house, and we'd crawl under it and have all kinds of fun with all our toys. You were a good kid. Grandpa would take you around to the neighborhood and show you off. He showed you to every neighbor This lady still on the corner. She never has forgotten you. That little boy with all those blonde curls. And now you've cut them off. And you were a good kid. And you would paint. You painted me 2 doorstops out of rocks. I still have them. And you would look for diamonds in my rocks. You were always busy. But you were a joy. And then I was out to your mother's house, and she was expecting with Joanne. And we were in the garden when it happened, and she decided she better get to the hospital. And she got there. It was a little rougher with Joanne. Joanne was kind of just didn't want to get out of there. She wasn't quite awake yet. And so finally I had you up at the hospital with me, and we were standing around, and your mother said, "Will you take him home, please?" Because she says, "I've had enough of this." And so we brought you home, and then we waited for her to call, or your dad to call, and let me know that that Joanne was delivered. But Joanne was kind of, she really didn't want to come right away. She wasn't quite ready. And but she's been a joy to me ever since. And then her mama decided to stay home, and I didn't get to watch you as much, or Joanne as much, as I did you. But then she made up for it, because she'd spend the weekends with me, and she was my girl, my very special granddaughter. And she still stays with me every minute that I can talk her into it. And they've both been big helps to me. And there's probably a lot I left out, but I left out Alex. I went to Canada, and when he was born. But they stayed there. And I had Alex some, but not like I had you two. When they had, I remember one time, your aunt called me from Farmington, New Mexico, and she says, "Mom, we have to be out of town. Can you come up and or I have to be out of town, that was it. Can you come up and take care of Alex?" Well, that's one time we drove straight through. And when I got there, he was asleep under the desk in the television station. And John says, "Well, he's okay." So then I take him up and take him home to their house and stay there until she gets back. I don't even know what she was doing. And then when they'd go on trips, they would bring him home to me, and I'd take care of him. Like the time that we were in Utah, we had Christmas one time in Utah. No, this was Christmas in Utah. Your mother and dad were still in Utah, and we were going to have Christmas there, and they came loaded with all this stuff. And so it's probably, kind of iffy here. But anyway, I remember them bringing all this, and it was snowing so hard. Oh, that's right. That was before Monica graduated. And that's when we went to Chicago. We just threw the kid in the car. The snow, he says, "The snow's coming through the windshield," because it was hitting us right in the face. And we drove to Chicago to be with Monica. And then we brought him back, and Mom and Daddy picked him up. But he didn't stay as much. Well, I didn't stay as much either. But as your dad says, he knew when he moved out of Utah that he'd better come home to San Antonio. He says he knew that this was home. And we've kind of been with each other ever since. And the years have gone by. But right now, I don't think I can remember too much more. As Connie has always "Mother, write a journal." I said, "Yeah, I will someday." But this is much better for you to do this. And and then edit it and put it in its right place.